barns now in heaven. So if the Lord needs storehouses, Grandpa can get the job done. Can I get a Kleenex real quick? I thought this was neat. Mike was sharing about an old chainsaw that Grandpa had, and I think Mike still has it to this day. Kind of telling of Grandpa's personality. It's an old chainsaw, no muffler, only operates at full throttle, no safety devices. Grandpa would say, "This is my kind of chainsaw. It really helps you get the job done quick." There's a proverb, Proverbs 22:29, that says, "Do you see a man skilled in his work? He will serve before kings. He will not serve before obscure men." Well, I don't know if Grandpa ever served before earthly kings, but he always served the King of Kings in all he did. And Grandpa incorporated that love for the Lord even into his buildings. The Stuber brothers' buildings were known to be some of the best well-built, overbuilt buildings in the area, and they would stand the test of time. And they had loyal customers. That's what they wanted. They wanted the Stuber brothers building. That reputation. Grandpa was also a teacher, and he was always willing to teach others, and he led by example, but he also expected much from you. And it's in those things, it's how a boy becomes a man, and how Grandpa showed love to others and leading them to Christ. Dennis remembers his dad walking in the fresh snow at Timberlea as a little boy, and Dennis was following him in his footsteps, and Grandpa turned around and saw him and started taking even bigger steps, so Dennis would have to try to keep up, challenging him to step up to the task. Jill remembers Grandpa being an encourager and always telling the kids that they could do it and that they should try it and not give up. And of course, Grandma was always there worrying, "Oh, Gene, be careful. Don't let the kids do that. It's dangerous." Brian also remembers Dad would never ask his men on the building projects to do something that he was not willing or able to do himself. And unfortunately for the men, Grandpa was pretty capable, and he usually showed them up, so they had to keep task. Brian also remembers Grandpa walking upright across the rafters, 20, 30 feet in the air, on the ends of the rafters, end to end, and not really thinking anything of it, with no fear. Just one other thought on the building projects. Dad was sharing with me Grandpa cutting corrugated steel roofing with a Porter cable circular saw. They just take a wood blade, flip it around backwards, and cut right through the steel, and the hot embers are flying in his face and his arms. No hearing protection, no eye protection like we do today. And some of the metal sticking in his arm and little drops of blood and that kind of thing, and Grandpa never even flinched. Just did what needed to be done. Grandpa also, though, served the Lord with gladness, and he knew the value of eternal things. 1 Corinthians 3:10 through 14, and these are the words of the Apostle Paul. He said, "By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as an expert builder, and someone else is building on it, but each one should be careful how he builds. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is in Jesus Christ. If any man builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, his work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each man's work. If what he has built survives, he will receive his reward." Brian remembers his dad being one of the first people at church in the morning on Sundays, and always willing to lead and be involved in the leadership of the church, and giving himself fully to the ministry that the Lord had put on his heart. Jill remembers her dad having just a heart for others in need. Whether it was the poor or orphans or those that didn't know Christ or just those who had wandered away and making bad choices, Grandpa pursued those opportunities and included the kids when he could. Nathan remembers Grandma and Grandpa responding to the church bulletin to help with the church's tape ministry, and they did that for several years faithfully. Heather and Sarah both recall memories of Grandpa's heart for the church in Brazil, and where he led all the various building projects. And I think there's a picture of Grandpa on the pinnacle of the roof, standing on the rafters with the hammer in his hand. Luke 6:43 through 45 talks about a tree and its fruit. "No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars, but the good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For out of the overflow of his heart, his mouth speaks. And Grandpa is well known, at least in our family, for his poetry. And I think in the little deal for today, there's an actual prayer that Grandpa wrote on his way home from the war. And just that Grandpa, so you can just see his love for the Lord and that softness in him. And he also has some published book with a lot of his poetry. Grandpa liked to write poetry. Sarah and I had communicated. Sarah's overseas, had said that she has some cherished moments with Grandpa when he wrote his book, The Smart Raccoon, which is a little kid's book that Grandpa wrote. And Sarah did the illustrations. That was real special for her. And of course, Grandpa's prayers. When Grandpa would pray, I just recall as a child, the prayers seemed way too long as a kid, and we could barely stop snickering and laughing and looking at each other during the prayers. But as I grew older, I just come to appreciate Grandpa's heart for the Lord. And it was almost just poetic the way he would pray. And you could tell he had an intimate relationship with the Lord. And lastly, just remembering just some quick traditions and memories. I was introduced to the game of Uno by Grandpa at his house at the game table. We remember Grandpa's love for photography and slideshows. And if you're under 20 years old, we're talking the real slideshows, not PowerPoint. This is the click, click. Grandpa loved to do that. Mike was sharing a memory. It was summertime, and as a little boy, he was out by the pool, and he wanted this Frisbee that Grandpa had. And Grandpa just didn't give it to him. He said, "You want it? You go get it." And he threw it in the pool. And Mike didn't know how to swim, but he learned to swim that day, and he got that Frisbee. So Grandpa's always pushing for the best out of you. I remember a time going 60 miles an hour on Thomas Road with Grandpa, listening to the Bill Gaither Trio on 8-track in his Lincoln Mark VI. This must have been early 80s. And just remembering that the Stuber lead foot lives on in future generations. I'll attest to that. Simple things in life, like foods. Remember the lemonade we would make? Grandpa had this lemon tree, and it was only about 10 feet tall, but it was in this planter that he had put rich soil in. And we used to grow these lemons. They were literally this big. They were the size of bowling balls, with almost 1-inch thick skins on the outside of them. We would make this good lemonade out of it. I later found out Grandpa's secret is Miracle-Gro. So, we remember root beer floats with Dad's root beer, mint tea from the mint bush in Grandpa's backyard, popcorn with Parmesan cheese. That was the first one for me. You've heard of chocolate and peanut butter together. Well, Grandpa coined, his claim to fame was Swiss cheese and barbecue sauce on a sandwich. And I think Ryan still eats those to this day. Those are some of his favorite. Sarah and Stavo had the privilege of living with Grandma and Grandpa for a year when they were first married. And they remember waking up at times to fresh bread in the morning, or Grandpa would do his stir fry and things like that. No one big thing. He didn't buy things. He didn't do some big event. He was just Grandpa, and he loved the Lord and all that he did. A tradition that will live on in our family going forward is the orange in the Hershey bar, and you see it up there that Jessica brought to remember Grandpa by. And I'm not even sure, I think it might even go back to when Grandpa was a little boy, but I know at the Tremont Church, after the kids' program on Christmas morning, they would hand out an orange, a Hershey bar, and a candy cane to each of the children. And when Grandma and Grandpa moved out here, the church out here didn't do that. So Grandpa started that tradition in our family and would give each of the kids an orange and a Hershey bar every Christmas since I can remember. And Dad's carrying on the tradition now this year. And I think I'll probably do that for my grandkids someday. And lastly, I just wanted to share one last story. When Grandpa was in the Pacific during World War II, he was on an island that apparently the U.S. had driven the Japanese off this island, and Grandpa, his unit was moved inland. And for some reason, maybe they were short on food or something. They were waiting for supplies to arrive. So Grandpa, being a farm boy, he went and rooted up some potatoes that he'd found growing on the island. And he and some guys made a fire, and they put the potatoes around the fire. And no sooner had they started, they got it, the air raid siren went off. So they had to cover up the fire and get down in their foxholes and wait. And it must have been at least an hour or more that went by, and they got the all clear, and now they got to start their dinner over again. and they went over to find that the potatoes had cooked in the coals all